concepts easy to grasp. Why crime and forensic fusion are currently collaborating with Dr. Paridi Bilor, a renowned forensic medicine and toxicology expert, to bring a 2-month specialized training program on autopsy and beyond, which is led by Dr. Bilor herself. This will provide a depth knowledge and practical insights into many critical areas such as autopsy and psychiatry. We encourage you to register and take advantage of this excellent learning opportunity. And the further details will be shared in the guest lecture group. Moving on, now I would like to request Neha to introduce our speaker.
It's my honor to introduce today's esteemed speaker, Mr. Sajith Mohmad Saleem, who will lead us in an engaging discussion on prison reform in contemporary times. Mr. Sajid Sir is highly respected criminologist and human rights researcher, known for a significant contribution to prison reforms and correctional services with a postgraduate degree in criminology, specializing in correctional services and human rights. He has dedicated his career to improving the life of prisoners and addressing challenges with the criminal justice system. Currently, Mr. Sajid works as a research associate at the Academy of Prison and Correctional Administration, Vellore. He has led important projects, including a nationwide study on the challenges faced by women prisoners and their children, supported by the Bureau of Police Research and Development. He worked closely with prison authorities across 12 states, gaining valuable insights into their conditions and needs. Previously, as a junior research consultant with National Human Rights Commission of India, Sajid Sir focused on improving the criminal justice system. He conducted research, trained police officers on human rights, and contributed to police policies aimed at reducing self-harm in prison. In Tihar prisons, Sajid Sir directly worked with young offenders, teaching life skills and offering support after their release. He also represented his research at many national and international conferences, making a lasting impact on prison reforms. Today's session will include the following subtopics: history of prison reforms worldwide, prison reforms in India setting, challenges within the system, case studies, and effective practices in prison and punishment. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sajid Mohmad Saleem to our webinar.
Thank you. I'd like to especially thank Harshita, Sneha, Swapnil, and Shakil for this wonderful initiative, for the guest lecture, and for the initiative that they have begun on their own. Let's wish them good luck in their journey. So before we move on, I'd like to share the agenda of today's program. Today's program will include a dive into the history of prison reforms in international as well as in the Indian setting. We'll have the challenges and the current scenario of where the prison reforms is and where it is going. And apart from that, we'll have some case studies based both, again, in global scenario as well as in Indian scenario. Before moving on, there was this question that I had posted on the group. So let's begin with, because Harshita also said that talking about prison reforms is important because it ends up shaping the society. Is it lagging? I didn't say anything. Okay, so let's get back. Yeah, you can open your mic and quickly, maybe in 2 or 3 minutes, we'll cover on why is it important to talk about prison reforms, or why do we imprison people in the first hand. Can I have any answers, please? Don't
Sir,
expect
according
to
to
be
me, it could be to make them feel the sense of guilt that they have committed a crime, and to re-evaluate and give themselves insight on what they could have done to prevent the crime, or what else they could have done to avoid it to commit a crime.
all right, fair.
Hi.
Swapnil says as a punishment for lawful act, we restrain their freedom. Yeah. Yeah, somebody else was speaking.
Yeah,
We'll have this.
hi.
We'll have quickly finish.
My name is Nikita, and as
Yes,
far as
Nikita.
I have engaged with the subject of incarceration, what I feel it is to do with the morality that is constructed within the society and to uphold that principle of morality. It could be anything, obviously, but what the society has constructed legally, according to the jurisprudence. And some people are considered quote unquote deviant, and then hence they are put into um, prisons, but historically, if we look at that morality, it's also to punish certain people who are from oppressed and marginalized communities. That is what I feel has been. If we look at incarceration.
Sir, also
Works,
we
works.
can also say that one of the reasons why we imprison people is to maintain the normal society away from these criminals, as they have the capacity to commit a crime to such an extent that it may hamper the humanity of the area. So this is why we need to imprison people.
Keeping them away from society and giving them a chance to maybe repent, think on the, ponder on the gravity of the act that they has caused. Oh, works, works. Do you have any other prevent? Just a moment, answer. To prevent
Also,
people from
sir,
committing crimes, please.
yes, sir. I think the threat of imprisonment serves as a deterrent, discouraging others from committing similar crimes. I think.
Works, incapacitation. Well, I feel we put people in prison because we are not creative enough to deal with the problem. Each to his own. We have our own answers. All right, so that was a very fair explanation of why do we put people in prison. So our lecture will also have 3 videos. Okay, do not call them films. But, so I'd like to play the first film. It's just short films. Okay, 4 minutes. Then we'll have a discussion again on the. I hope the screen is visible. My screen visible, please.
No, sir.
Screen is not visible.
No, sir, not yet.
No, sir.
Yes, it is visible now, sir.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
It just stopped.
Is the screen visible, please?
Not now, it
Not
just stopped.
No, it's not.
Like I've been in Adam Garden for 20 plus years, and I've never seen this kind of day. Everything I was planning is eaten to shreds. So I installed a machine. This mystery creature living under the shed was destroying my garden. Like I've been in Adam Garden for 20 plus years, and I've never seen this
Hi,
kind
sir.
of day.
Screen is not visible. It just stopped.
The audio is not visible.
The audio is audible, but the video is not visible. The screen sharing has stopped.
And here the okay. I'll apologize. I don't understand. We dream of being a digital country. They meeting with a hello hello bolte रह जाते. Is the screen visible now?
Not really.
Not at all, sir.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it is visible
Yes,
now.
sir. Visible now.
Yes, sir. It is
Yes,
visible.
sir.
Finally.
This mystery creature living under the shed is destroying my garden. I've been an avid gardener 20+ years, and I've never seen everything I was planning is eaten to shreds. So I installed a motion detection camera. I saw this squirrel. It seemed too little for me to pull. There was this possum as well, but he mostly came out at night, so it just didn't add up. And one day, bang, that's when I saw it was junk. He looked straight into the camera like he was saying, "Yeah, I'm here, I'm eating your garden. What are you going to do about it? Thanks for the food." At first, I was a little upset. I would little fence with logs and stuff underneath. Nothing I did worked. So used to seeing something pop up in the back of the belly. And it was like, what? There's two of them. He had a girlfriend? They were in the back of the scenes. Acting identical. It was like some guy's joke. Like, one is nothing. What I did, they were always what I said the whole day. That's all they did was make up. Eventually, after seeing it, so they are. I was like, well, I can. They went into hibernation in November last year. But this year, the plan was to have the garden ready to wake up. I started my garden as security. Started it. Well, it takes a lot to plant the garden. This year was actually tough. So I love the most. The amount of hibernation. Finally, I got the notification. It was chunky. Nibbles came out. We started to see heat on that, so we had a baby, and then sure enough, the kid shows up. That's the first baby. A week or so goes by, and then another shows up, really small, and we named that one Chitlins. And then 2 weeks later, another coming in, and sometimes they're together, sometimes they're alone, but they all eat late. No issue. Nibbles don't even share themselves. Nibbles the mother eating. It's like, can I have some? It's like, I'm eating. I'm just trying to survive. Just trying to make it there. I can do a job to tag them, keep them safe. Like, thinking next year there could be 6, 7, 8 babies. Maybe I can start making the garden big. Okay, bring it up.
Did the video lag? Did everybody leave or? discussion, quick discussion. What did we? The video lagged. Huh? So was anybody able to make out what the video was about? Alright, you can turn your mic on and what I'll do is I'll share the video over WhatsApp and you can always watch the video. Directly jump into, is my screen visible? Is my PPT visible?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So here we are. I'll directly jump into the topic. We are here to talk about prison reforms. So just let's have a historical background of what prison reforms was. Okay, so let's begin with the global context. Because apparently prison reforms was recorded very well in the Western society. So again, history is what we have in written form. So just because they have been able to note down their studies very well, so we consider the Western thoughts as timeless and perfect. Again, so there are two people that I'd like to. I cannot see what's happening in the chat, so please turn on your mic and if you to say something. Okay. So there are two people that I'd like to throw some light on who were early recorded reformists in the zone of prison reform. So first is John Howard. All right. So John Howard was a philanthropist in the 18th century. So he started his works in around 1755. And what happened was he was a person from a well-to-do family. So what he used to do was his major, I don't know, pastime was traveling. So he used to travel to a lot of countries in Europe, and also as he was a philanthropist, he used to mostly travel and work for people. So that's what his main job profile was. So in 1755, there was a earthquake in Lisbon. So he traveled to Lisbon to help people there, and apparently he was caught by the French police there, and he was imprisoned in a prison in France for 6 days, and again for few months in another prison in France. And he was in exchange for another prison from UK. He was exchanged back to UK. So that experience in prison led him to really deeply think about prison reforms, because the condition there really appalled him. So that happens when you are from a well-to-do family and you see poor people not being able to keep up in life as they, and life for them is very different. It's really hard. So he was very much appalled by the conditions there, and he decided to work for prison and in prisoners' rights. So again, this happens in 18th century. So he was then appointed as a high sheriff at Bradfordshire in UK. Okay, and I think he traveled around 42,000 miles. That's around 70,000 kilometers in whole of Europe, visited hundreds of prisons, and he came up with few suggestions that he implemented as a high sheriff there. So solitary confinement was one of the major, that in that era, it was considered a very good thing for the prisoners. Solitary confinement and hard labor and religious institutions. So he considered crime as an issue with the morality of a human. So just because you are morally incorrect, you end up committing crime. And his solution for correcting a person who is a deviant was deep penance. Penance is a literal translation in Hindi is tapasya. That is, again, religious institution is what he based his philosophy on. And he also suggested hard labor that will help you, I don't know, maybe turn into a human. And he was also the very one of the very few early social thinkers who said that the concept of prison is to rehabilitate and reform the prisoners than mere punishment. Okay, so this was John Howard in 18th century, and he worked in 1755 to 1777 80. That's when his work stemmed. And there was this another lady, Elizabeth Fry, and she was also very well celebrated prison reformer, because she was the first, again, philanthropist to talk about female prisoners. And again, these all stems from UK. Okay, and so there was there. So the biggest challenge that prison have had from since we can imagine is overcrowding in prison. So prison has never been able to develop its capacity according to the increasing population. So that's a problem in 18th century. That's a problem in 22nd century. So and it'll continue because the population rate increases at a very high rate, and we don't have the sufficient means or funds to actually build prisons to meet the population. Okay, so what the UK did in the 18th century was to build prison ships. So it's called hulks. So a lot of prisoners who were not being able to accommodate in the prisons, they were shifted into halted ships. There were a lot of ships in the docks of UK. So they used to shift the prisoners there. And eventually that ended up, so these ships traveled and all of these people were dumped in Australia as well as America. That's how these, you might have heard of Americans and Australians being people actually transported from UK because they were criminals there. So that's how the story goes. Just because the prisons were overcrowded there, they were earlier put into the ships, and as that also increased, they were slowly transported to US and what is today called US and Australia, which also deeply disturbed the indigenous population there. All right, so Elizabeth Fry. So again, Elizabeth Fry was from a well-to-do family, and one day her family friend convinces her to go and visit a prison. And again, during that time, the male and female prisoners were not segregated or separated in the prisons. They used to stay together. And again, she was very appalled by the condition of the women prisoners as well as of the children of women prisoners in the prisons, as well as in these hulks, in the ships that used to house these criminals. So one of the very first things she did was to build a prison school inside the ships for the children of prisoners. So that was one of the very standard works she did as a prison reformer, again, in the 18th century. Okay, so 300 years back. And again, there was this another thing that she introduced in the prison was, okay, so why is it important to talk about prison reforms? If I put an argument that everybody gets a fair chance, okay, the rights and the duties are equal to everybody. But then if a person chooses to commit a crime, because that's the whole criteria of imprisoning people, mens rea and actus rea, you are committing a crime in your own sound mind. So if somebody is committing a crime in their own sound mind, why should we talk about prison reforms? So let them, unko jail mein sadna do, because that was an act that they did in their own sound mind for their own benefit. So if somebody is being a criminal, so they will have to face the consequences for their action. Newton's law, every action has an opposite and equal reaction. So if you, I don't know, a part of some action that will cause deep harm to the victim and eventually the society, why should we talk about prison reforms? It is important to talk about prison reforms because 99% of the people inside prison will be out one day. Again, conviction rate in India is 2%. So if let's consider that another 10 years we have conviction rate of 2%, but the rest of the 98% will get out of the prison one day. So it is very important to talk about prison reforms, because if we don't actually work on the reformation, rehabilitation, and repatriation of these deviants, there's a high tendency that once they're out of the prison, they'll go back to society and commit the crime again. So looking at the eventual goal, the goals for all the social scientists should be longitudinal. It shouldn't be, for example, uh, there's this concept of instant justice in India. Still, a lot of people are for the notion of death penalty. But then that's a quick result, which will not result in anything. Okay, yeah. So Elizabeth Fry, what she did in 18th century was she tried and introduced vocational upskilling for the inmates. And she was the first prison reformer who gave the women prisoners sui dhaga, sewing kit, so that when the prisoners get out or when they're transported to Australia or US, they have some means ki kapda sil ke to ji sakte hain na, because kapda and food are two businesses in the world that will never go down. So if you invest in food and clothing, or you train yourself to actually glide in the business of food and clothing, you'll have a safe future. So understanding this, Elizabeth Fry, what she did was she used to train the women prisoners in swing, which unfortunately is even continued till today. So if you go to the prisons in today's worlds, most of the women prisoners are taught silai kadai, which is not relevant today because let's not be too critical. Okay, so so that was early reforms. What there are a lot of examples, but then, for example, time is short. But then I'll again, if we look at Indian, not necessarily prison reforms, but how we used to look at punishment was there was this. So there was this little story I'll share. There was a king in some southern part of India, and there's this frail mother comes and complains to the king that as part of the chariot, the king rides a chariot. So the daughter of the king's daughter was on a chariot ride, and that had accidentally destroyed the cattle of this poor lady. So what the king did was equal punishment, and he punished. So there were a lot of cows that were run over by the chariots. So the king ordered the same punishment for his own daughter, that her daughter should be also run over by. So that's the retributive form of punishment. All right. So that was retribution, which was a prevalent form of punishment for a very long time. There are a lot of population in India that still feels that an eye for an eye is the only revenge is the only way of meeting or giving out the punishment. But then again, as time passed, we transitioned from punitive to rehabilitative approaches. So again, just because it's global context, there are two major forms of schools in prison reforms that facilitated the idea of punitive reform. So one is Pennsylvania system and one is Auburn system. All right, so Pennsylvania system was they mainly focused on segregation of prisoners. So all of the prisoners were put into single cells. They were not allowed to talk or meet or interact with each other. And that again, so if you look at the prison reforms in historical context, most of the philosophy of reformation and rehabilitation is based on religion. So there's a lot of penance, there's a lot of maafi mangna from the god, there's a lot of working on the self through harsh measures. For example, isolating someone in gallows for a longer period, then they felt that will lead into reformation because that will give them time to think. But then that has not proved to work. Redemption, that's what the aim was of earlier prison reforms, was to the person should redeem himself of the ill that he has done. Crime was more of a morality issue back then. They also thought that it will help them evolve good hygiene habits, because you stay in a band kamra and you're supposed to बंद कमरे में तो सफाई खुद करना पड़ेगा. So cleanliness and the hygiene was also used as a medium for punishment to reform these criminals. So this was Pennsylvania system. And then time changed, and there was this superintendent of prison. He was called in Auburn prison in US. And what he did was, although the prisoners were separated at night, so they used to go and sleep in individual cells at night, but then during the day they used to work together, eat together, and spend time together. And the philosophy of Auburn prison was through hard work, cooperation, and mutual respect, you can reform yourself. Again, heavily based on religion, but then that didn't involve a lot of social segregation. So during the day, you could be together, but during the night, you're supposed to stay by yourself and also silent. So that was, I don't know, the path through which the prison reforms evolved during the times. And today the world looks at rehabilitative approaches because we have understood that there is no point in actually putting people through a lot of harsher punishment. Also, it's very costly. The cost of imprisoning a prisoner is very high. So it's okay. The government, also the prison reforms is not the agenda of any government, because you cannot, आप prisoners को reform करके vote नहीं मांग सकते. And everything, not only in India, that's how the world runs. And most of the social or political or policy changes happens based on how can you fool the people. है ना, मतलब I can say that मैंने 100 घर में राशन बांट दिए, मैंने 100 टॉयलेट बना दिए, that'll help me get more votes than if I say कि मैंने 100 criminals को reform कर दिया, so people will kick me out of the society. So prison reforms has not been a agenda for a lot of people, and although it's sad, but that's how it is. And then 1948 happened, and World War II ended, and we ended up coming up with a Bible of human rights called as UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So that kind of codified human rights. Human rights existed before that also. So that actually codified human rights. And there were a lot of rules, standards that the United Nations framed. Okay, for example, the International Covenant for Political and Civil Rights. So India ratified it in 1979, and so that considered prisoners' rights as a civil and political issue. And then came the economic, social, and political, cultural rights. India also ratified that, and in that, health became an important topic of discussion. So again, health and mental health of prisoners also got included, and just because it was codified, we ratified. So we were supposed to include those rules inside our own constitution or the state rules that we have. And then UN again had standard minimum rules, which is called Mandela rules. And then there were a lot of rules for juveniles, the Riyadh guidelines. So in early 20th century, 1990s, 1993, 1994, there were a lot of standard rules that the UN had given out, which is the standard today. Okay, so that's how that's what the history of prison reforms is. So this is what prison reforms in India looks like. So Audible now? Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you are audible now.
Yes, sir.
Sorry for
Sir, we cannot hear you once again. Hello? Sir, we cannot hear you.
see my screen. So again, prison, the most use of prison was to work against the dissenters of British Raj. So all of those people who used to speak against the British Raj were put in jails. Political, a lot of political prisoners, and then there were few people. There was Macaulay, Lord Macaulay was the first person who decided again, as I said, not even in earlier forms. I think even today, people who are deeply dedicated towards the issue of prison reforms are deeply religious. That might not be true, but then that is 100% true for the older reformers who used to. And submission to God was their most, that's how they used to convince the people. Okay, so this is in 1836 and 1838. Lord Macaulay decided to visit a lot of prisons, and as you can see, he focused on the physical and moral condition of inmates. He recommended that money allowance for convicts should be stopped and favored solitary confinement. So you should not look at it negatively. Again, solitary confinement, because people at that time used to feel that putting someone away from the society will give them enough time to think about themselves. So that's also a form of punishment. In बच्चों का हम वो it's very common in our society कि अगर बच्चे ने कुछ ऐसा क्या which doesn't please the parents, तो उस बच्चे को थोड़ा देर थोड़ा दूर खड़ा करते हैं, दीवार की तरफ फेस करके खड़ा करते हैं. That's to make the child think कि आपने क्या किया है. But then that is in a prison act which again codified things were written down. In 1999, 1920, an All India Jail Committee was formed. In 1935, again, it was considered to be included as a state subject. Okay, so this was pre-independence, and after independence, Nehruji, what he felt was, because Gandhiji and Nehruji, Gandhiji has also spoken a lot about prison reforms, and I think he is only one of the very few people who have been imprisoned, and after coming out, they have advocated for prison reforms, which I don't see today. I see a lot of political prisoners in prison today, but then after coming out, nobody talks about prison reforms. So what Nehruji did was, in 1951, he called Walter Reckless. So Walter Reckless was a renowned criminologist based in US. So he was a UN expert. And Kumarappa, again, very important to talk about Kumarappa because he was a Indian from Tamil Nadu, Indian who again was very focused on criminal justice system reforms. So Reckless came up with a report on the request of Nehru, and that was the major breakthrough in prison reforms in India post-independence, and that revised the older 1984 Prison Act. That was a key against the Walter Reckless report, was a key against the older reforms, and he submitted his report in 1960. Again, in 1957, there was this committee, All India Jail Manual Committee, that was formed, and it submitted its reports in 1960. And that was again, so government takes it time to formulate things. So in 1972, the government again formed a national policy on prison reforms that advocated mostly what Walter Reckless and the All India Jail Manual Committee recommended. And in 1980, so this was again a breakthrough. All India Committee on Jail Reforms, also called the Mulla Committee Report. So it SC Judge Justice Honorable Justice A.N. Mulla, led by three other people, visited prisons and came up with a report, a hardcore report, which was constructed, which was based on their own experiences over 3 years, visiting, working, consulting with people working in prisons. And Mulla Committee report came out. So 50 years down the line, if you still look at, so none of them have been implemented, which I'll talk about later. What's the issue of implementing a lot of suggestions? So if you look at Mulla Committee report, most of the reforms suggested 50 years ago, if worked on, can solve the problems in today's scenario. So most of the Indian prison problems can be solved if we just even follow 50% of what Justice Mulla and his committee said. But that's a little difficult. Okay, and there was this one very beautiful thing. So you can go and read. It's a voluminous report. You can go and read. But then there was this very interesting thing that I found in Mulla Committee report was. So most of the violence inside prison is a very big issue. So most of the violence inside prison happens at night. Okay. So the prison closes at 7 p.m. So after 7 p.m., no visitors are allowed. So most of the violence happens when the prison is closed. And understanding this 50 years ago, that's the beauty of Indian criminal justice system. So what they did was, he suggested that an officer of deputy superintendent level. So a prison is headed by a superintendent, and under them are deputy superintendent, assistant superintendents, and under them are warders, and the warder is led by a head warder, and head warder reports to assistant superintendent. So that's the hierarchy of a prison system. So what Mullaji said was, in his report, he said that an officer of the deputy superintendent rank is supposed to stay inside the prison, especially during the night. And if he has to leave the prison, he has to get the permission of the DG, not even the superintendent. He has to get the permission of the DG, which was very well thought. But then again, India may people get government job to have a safe, secure life. No, people don't. If I go talk to a deputy superintendent and I say that, sir, rule says that you're supposed to spend all the nights inside prison, so he'll not talk to me the next time I go, because he has his own family who will risk their own life to spend their night. But then I have felt that if you have constant vigil, also there's a lot of sexual harassment that happens inside prison, irrespective of whether it's a male prison or female prison. There's a lot of documented evidences of rape happening inside prison, again at night, suicides inside prison happening again late at night, which can all be culled down if you are under a constant vigil. If you know somewhere in your mind that there's a deputy superintendent who is awake and who's on rounds at night, I'm pretty sure, unless you are a very dreaded gangster, for which we have other reforms, I'm pretty sure there can be the reforms in the reduction of violence in prison. 50 saal pehle bola. But then again, who in the deputy superintendent rank will spend their lives? The person who will spend their life will be considered crazy and will be suspended. Anyway, so then in 1986, RK committee report. Classification of prisoners, they realized was very important, because if you mix the prisoners, there's a very big possibility of. So crime is a learned phenomenon. Okay, criminality is a learned behavior. So if a petty offender comes inside the prison, and if he sees that if you are powerful, if you have a good gang, if you have contacts, there's a lot of things you can do even inside prison. So segregation of prisoners is very important. Otherwise, after coming out of prison, there's a high chance that you'll do more heinous and hardened crimes. And then came Justice Krishna Iyer, one of the very lucky part of Supreme Court as well as Kerala government. So Krishna Iyer was the first law minister of Kerala, and then eventually he took up practice, and eventually he was the Chief Justice of India. So Krishna Iyer's birthday, November 15, is also celebrated as Probation Day in Kerala. So I'll come to probation later. Justice Krishna Iyer report mostly focused on condition of women prisoners, which again focused on their reformation, rehabilitation, sanitation, hygiene, health of the women prisoners. And then, yeah, Ramamurthy was a state of Karnataka, again, a very important Supreme Court decision in which a new prison act was recommended. And again, there was a lot of prison administration and treatment bill. Okay, so the 1960 thing that I was telling, there's no coverage of 1960. Okay. Created its first model prison manual in 1960 based on Walter Eccles report and the All India Jail Committee report. Okay, so model prison manual is a suggestion by the center government on how the rules for the prison should be. So prison being a state subject, so the state's responsibility to build or to create laws. It's a state responsibility, but then the center often comes up with model manuals, which is a standard on which your state rules should be based. So in 2003, again from 1960, then in 2003 it was again amended under the aegis of BPRD. Again, in 2016, a need was felt, and again BPRD came up with model prison manual. So in today's time, model prison manual 2016 is the standard, and I think some 23 states and UTs have followed the model prison manual. Most of them are coming up with the prisonal, and the new government, not new, it's been 10 years, came up with a model prison and correctional services act 2023. They're also working on a model prison manual 2024. So maybe it's been 2 years that they've been working on it, has not come out. So maybe into 2025, we are lucky we'll be able to see newer forms of. So I have a history of working in NHRC, and I was lucky enough to be a part of NHRC team, which included suggestions for the model prison manual 2024, and we included a special chapter on transgenders, issue of transgenders. So that's one thing that we were part of. Okay, so this is some of the important conclusions or points out of the Indian prison system that we just discussed. How the 1894 Act came about, how it's still relevant but outdated, and how things were before and after the freedom movement, what happened post-independence, what were the different recommendations, Justice Krishna Iyer, Mullah Committee report. There were a lot of manuals that came in. There were a lot of Supreme Court interventions. There were a lot of, so there's this new thing that the new age social reformers are doing is filing PILs, and most of them comes from RTI. So recently, a reporter Sukanya has unearthed the caste discrimination in the prison manuals itself. The Supreme Court. So in 11 states prison manual, the menial jobs, although it's very derogatory, the jobs which are considered very menial, such as cleaning, hard labor, are distributed to the lower caste. And Supreme Court had intervened, and only a few months ago, the Honorable Supreme Court gave its judgment. So that was what we have been doing on paper. Okay, and so there are few recent developments in the Indian correctional systems. For example, there's a lot of e-prison initiative that the government has come up with. So all of the prison are supposed to update their details, the basic details, which is available to the public every 4 hours in the e-prison portal. So there's a lot of population data you can get. And for other pillars of the criminal justice system were part of the prison reforms. For example, such as getting all the important information. For example, who are the people who need legal services, or the people who are inside the prison despite getting bail are still inside prison. The population, the people who are eligible for remission. So all of those information are lively available for mostly for the staff who works in the prison system, but also some part for the public. There are a lot of video conferencing. So COVID was a blessing in that form, because there was a lot of e-court thing happening. Although we just saw how the internet works. It's really difficult. Then modernization of prison administration. Prison administration has now understood the importance of recruiting psychologists, social workers. Although it's not a sanctioned post, that's where the government lacks. You should actually hire permanent people to work inside, because what I have felt, so it's been 7 years that I've been working in prison. So prison reforms or working with prisoners is a longitudinal thing. It'll take at least 10 years to understand what the basic issue inside the prison is. So you should have permanent people who have secure jobs inside the prison who will take care of the. So, for example, the budget for Indian prisons for all the 36 states and UTs is 1800 crore rupees. And 80% of 1800 crore rupees is staff salary. And so most of the staff salary, as in salary for the superintendent, salary for the wardens, for the petrol and vehicle and housing facility for the staff. It only looks at the, which is also very important, but then it discards other important features which really help in the reformation and rehabilitation. Few prisons, for example, Tamil Nadu prisons have been recruiting social workers and psychologists inside prison, although again not permanent and on a very low salary. But then something we'll have to start somewhere. And most of the Indian prisons have now focused on and started focusing on skill development programs. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible now,
Yes,
but just a few minutes ago you were not audible and your screen is not visible.
Screen is because I ended the. So what I'll do is I'll play another movie, and it's very important.
Okay, sir, sure.
I thought that it'll be interesting, but then what happens is it's very important to know what is happening in different parts of the country. So this is an initiative in the presence of Finland. So we'll watch the movie and have a discussion. So there's a non-profit organization based in US called Impact Justice, and they, along with a lot of criminal justice functionaries, judges, lawyers, people who work in the non-profits, ex-criminals, visited the Finland prison system to understand their system. So we'll also see how their system is. If it doesn't work, I'd like to only apologize because I'll be sharing the same on WhatsApp. You'll watch it in HD later. It is visible, I hope.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. Okay. Talaga kasi sorry.
The design is way less punitive than what we have in the United States, for sure.
There's fruit. There's fresh fruit.
No, this is a weapon in the United States.
In Finland and United States, the prison system. What I have learned of yours, it's full of shit.
We go out step by step.
Yeah.
We go open prison and start learning. One part of the welfare state is that it sees and understands the causes of crime differently.
Yes, the living room, living area, and kitchen, they have their own bank account.
It almost feels like one of those cabins in the Catskills.
Yeah.
Oh,
Luxury. This is the business I'm searching. As you can see, we have an awesome view.
like this like feeling just to be here. Something like that.
Instead of asking what is wrong with her, we should ask what happened to her. We try to work as much as possible that when the baby is turned 3, the mother can
This notion of like a human dignity and that the redemptive quality of a criminal justice system. Like everybody can redeem themselves. You're not afraid you're gonna get stabbed on? Okay. Like my boy. The worst thing you do in your life, not the like title or tagline for the rest of your life. In America, we do lots of reform on the march. I think, as I walk away, you have to really be courageous enough to take that next step. Our system needs to be transformed, not reformed.
Yeah, I know. All right. So what they were trying to showcase was so in India, not only in India. So I was part of this study, an all India study on stigmatization and victimization of released women prisoners. And what I heard was, which was a very new experience for me, was one woman in Odisha told me that release is a bigger punishment than imprisonment, because once you're convicted, you spend decades inside the prison. Your family ties break off, your social ties break off. There's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of social exclusion. So getting out of prison is a bigger punishment than coming inside prison, which the people in Finland doesn't face, because that's what the prison warden inside the Finland prison was telling, that your past is not a burden on you anymore. Your past stays in the past. But then again, Finland is not doing wonders as a country, not only in prison reforms. Their education, their government, their policies in general, we have, well, no, not we, in Finland, the society thinks that what did the society do wrong that their children are committing crime. So that's the philosophy that these people have. But then again, there's this another very big thing that I have noted is most of the humane reforms, prison reforms happens in places that are colder, relatively colder. Now, you cannot apply those kind of logic in places that are near the equator. So a lot of prison theories came from cartographic schools. Cartographic school is school of geography, Boston School of Cartography, and there's a lot of early criminology theories that stemmed from behavior stemming from the geography of a nation. So although this seems tempting कि फिनलैंड में लोग क्या ही कमाल कर रहे हैं, but it's very, because have you seen the road rage in India? हम रोड पे कैसे झगड़ा करते हैं, आपने देखा है. It's not because of we Indians are by default very angry. It's the role of geography is also very important on crime and deviant behaviors. Okay, so do you have any questions? A lot of what I'll do is I'll quickly go over to the best practices inside the Indian prisons. Then we'll call it a day. Screen visible?
Yes, sir.
All right. So again, these are some statistics. Most of the, as I said, the biggest issue, which was an issue, which is an issue, and which will be an issue, is overcrowding in prisons. And most of our prisons are covered by under-trial prisoners. 70% of the heavily overcrowded prisons. Some prison in India are as overcrowded as 400 people. Okay, so 100 लोग का जगह 400 लोग ठूस हैं उसके अंदर. Again, a very big issue with the vacancies. So what happens is there's a lot of vacancy among the staff. So what happens is a 100 लोग का vacancy है, only 70% has been filled. So the duty of the 30% also falls on the head of the 70%. And just because there are no specialized staff to do the paperwork or the so everything is done by the prison superintendent and his team. You realize कोर्ट को जवाब उनको देना पड़ता है, human rights commissions को उनको जवाब देना पड़ता है. All the paperwork are done by his team. You're also supposed to manage the prison. You're supposed to make sure that the rules are followed. You're supposed to make sure that violence doesn't happen. You're supposed to stop the gang wars. So being the head of a prison is a very difficult thing. Again, limited resources, as I said. Her Majesty prisons in so the prisons in London and UK, so England and Wales, they have a budget of a total of £2 billion 2 billion pounds वो लोग का बजट है for a country as small as England and Wales, and पूरे भारतवर्ष का 1700 करोड़ है manage. There are a lot of evidence-based solutions that have proved to work in the prison reform sector. For example, there are studies that have shown that a convict, when he completes or he gets a college degree, has tendency to not commit a crime again. So if someone's convicted, and if he spends a lot of time educating, getting a formal degree from a college, chances are that he'll not relapse back into crime. Brazil had introduced this scheme where if a person is convicted and if he reads a book and if he submits a report on the book and he scored out of 10 and out of 10 marks he'll get, so that number of days will be minus from his sentence, which is again very beautiful. Again, the whole purpose is to inculcate the habit of reading. And if you inculcate, if reading is a habit of yours, there's a lot of reformation that can happen within. Okay, vocational training, mental health support. Yeah, so that's something that the prison systems across the country, world have been recognizing. And there have been improved mental health care, improved, not to the standard, improved mental health care support to prisoners. There's a lot of family connection programs. Maharashtra Prisons has this program called Gala Bhet, in which family members of who are related by blood. So if the children of the prisoners, so a day is selected and they are allowed to meet their children or other family members without bars. So Gala Bhet, which literally translates to a hug, which has again shown out a lot of wonders. Post-release support. Government of Kerala is actually investing in a lot of schemes for post-release. You've got cash benefits, one-time payment of 15,000 rupees to start your own employment. Again, 25,000 from Maharashtra government. You get 15,000 rupees for the dependents of prisoners. You get money for the marriage and education of your girl child. So there are a lot of, Bihar is also coming up with a lot of post-release support, but it has not formulated yet. All right. Apart from a lot of civil society, there are a number of really credible civil society organizations. Civil society organizations, NGOs, who are working inside the prison and doing a real good job. Okay. To name a few, Prayas, a field action initiative of TISS is doing a real good job. Law Foundation from Bihar is doing a good job. Project Second Chance from Delhi is doing a good job. Again, there are a lot of initiatives. But then, see, the social service, social workers, social reformers will continue dedicating their time and energy towards rebuilding the, they'll keep helping people. But the whole point is actually the state, the government taking up the responsibility. The system should be oiled enough so that you'll actually not need NGOs one day. The system should be self-sufficient, that they have such policies that helps the prisoners. So Telangana state has done real good job. Okay, so what Telangana state did was for prisoners who used to release from their prisons, they opened a petrol pump near Hyderabad Central Jail. And also, again, in Hyderabad, they have got few petrol pumps which are purely run by ex-prisoners, which has directory. So Vinay Kumar Singh IPS, he was the Director General of Telangana State who introduced these. Should name him because he's done a really good job. And they also help the prisoners get house once they release. And yeah. So the Delhi State Legal Service Authority also had introduced a scheme similar to this, wherein they had called 8 companies and they had trained around 90 convicts from Tihar jail, and 83 among them have got a job. So that was done in 2000, early this year. ex-convicts lands jobs with big companies. It's very important to help the inmates gainfully get employment post-release. Otherwise, there's a very high chance of relapsing back into crime. Okay, so Beena Chintalapuri was this psychologist from Osmania University. She, along with DG Vinay Kumar Singh in Telangana state, introduced this psychological intervention called Unnati program. So Unnati program was a psychological intervention with inmates in Telangana state prison, which included a lot of mental health care support, soft skills, life skills training, and that resulted in prison population dropping by 30,000 in 2 years. So the biggest problem that we are not able to fight, which is overcrowding, was done by a woman. All right, so the Tihad prisons also had tried including employment for people post-release. So they had actually developed an employment exchange program in which superintendents, so Tihad prisons have 16 central jails inside them. So all the 16 superintendents were supposed to identify interested candidates who would like to get job post-release, and they were supposed to tie up with the employment exchange program of Delhi, and once post-release they were supposed to, but then again this didn't work out because all right, so the biggest problem with Indian criminal justice system is the lack of cooperation, coordination between the four pillars of criminal justice system. There's no coordination among police, judiciary, prosecution and prison. Everybody works in their own silos, which doesn't get us anywhere. So there are a lot of, on paper we have a very perfect system, but then when it translates, it doesn't translate into field. Because just today I was reading this news wherein let me just, a 93, I'll just read the news. A 93-year-old woman, 93-year-old woman gets parole in Karnataka. Moved by her condition, Justice B. Veerappa contacted the Supreme Court Registrar urging a review of her sentence. So सुनने में तो बड़ा अच्छा लगा ना, a judge intervened and a 93-year-old woman gets parole. But isn't it very sad? So this woman is inside the prison, right? So क्या वो superintendent या prison staff देख नहीं रहा कि there's a old lady inside the prison. She cannot even walk. So she was shifted. So she had to be literally carried because she couldn't walk. She was that old. She was that fragile. So we are grateful that there was a judge who made a visit and it came to his notice. But then weren't the superintendents and other prison staffs aware? उसी के तो जेल में है वो औरत. How difficult is it to file a petition to get her out of the prison? That's, again, as I said, prison reforms is not an agenda of the government. There's this paper that I had written. It's still under consideration for publication. And I had identified predictors for successful employment. So people who have worked a minimum of 6 months before imprisonment, who have been employed for a longer period, who has held a job inside. So inside the prison also you have a lot of jobs, which is divided again into 3 forms, unskilled, semi-skilled and skilled. People who have a job lined after release. So if they get out and the previous employer who used to employ them don't mind of their history of being imprisoned and actually takes them back. So people who have a job, okay, they know they'll get a job after release. People who have their documentations tight, for example, they have their Aadhaar card, they have their Manrega report card, they have their other forms of documentation high, and people who have a very strong interpersonal relation and attachment to the family find it easy to get a job once they're out. And people who have chronic usage of drug, has again heavy physical and mental health conditions, are observed to not get jobs. Okay, so this was in brief what prison reforms. I know I have overshot, but then this is a brief coverage of prison reforms country in the globe. There was another film that I wanted to show, but I'll just share the link over WhatsApp so that you can go watch it later. Which is again film successful reformation, rehabilitation, and repatriation of a woman based in Maharashtra, and how this intervened and helped her get back into society. Oh, there's a big comment.